It looks like we're going to go ahead and get started, and then I'll kind of let them arrive, and I'll, as moderator, I can use that. Okay, great. So we are going to go ahead and get started if everyone wants to get set up. Okay. Are the live streams running? Wonderful. Okay. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Alexandra Flores Quilty. I am the campaign director of Free Speech for People. We are a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization dedicated to strengthening our democracy. Thank you for gathering us here today for this press conference. We're gathered here on Capitol Hill regarding the introduction of an incredibly exciting new bill introduced by Congresswoman Summer Lee and Congressman Khanna, the Abolish Super PACs Act, Bill number HR 2352. This is an important piece of legislation that addresses one of the most critical issues facing our democracy. A small number of wealthy donors, ultra-wealthy donors, have an outsized influence in American politics, corruptly impacting our elections and our government and making it harder for regular people's voices to be heard. That's why Congress must pass the Abolish Super PACs Act. Today we will hear from bill champions, legal experts, and advocates from grassroots organizations. After the remarks from our speakers, there will be time for a Q&A for the press. There are also a number of live streams here today reaching people from across the country. Thank you to everyone tuning in via the live stream. We are really excited for Americans from across the country to learn about this serious problem facing our democracy and how Rep. Lee and Rep. Khanna's bill will address it. We know that people from every corner of our nation have been waiting for a reform like this. I'm honored to now turn it over to Congresswoman Summer Lee.
Thank you all so much. Good afternoon. It's a beautiful day. Spring is here. As summer, hopefully I'll bring us a little farther as we get into the better weather. But thank you all so much. I'm Summer Lee, Congresswoman for representing Pennsylvania's 12th Congressional District, Pittsburgh, Western Pennsylvania. One of I would say, a district that has known the ills of super PACs way too much. Before we get into that, I do want to thank Congressman Khanna for his partnership on this bill and for the advocacy of the folks who are gathered here with us today, including Free Speech for the People, so many other voices that are here, the speakers who are going to contribute to this really crucial conversation. This is an initiative that is dear to my heart. So we're not going to mince any words today. I think that if you are paying attention to what's going on in our country, then you realize that our democracy is in a free fall. One could argue that our democracy is failing in a sense that if you can see the fissures in your democracy, then we are in big trouble. Our government is run by billionaires. The White House, Congress, and the Supreme Court answer to corporations and the ultra wealthy more than they answer to the American people. 15 years ago on this day, the D.C. Circuit ruled in favor of Speech Now, effectively putting our democracy up for sale. The decision created what we know as super PACs. It has put our campaign finance and our system straight into the hands of billionaires like Elon Musk and Jeffrey Yaz and a few others. And right now, we're seeing historic levels of spending in each election cycle as we proceed. Last year, we saw some of the most expensive primaries in our nation's history. Not even general elections, primaries, right? To keep folks out of Congress who are representatives of their communities. Everyday people, your neighbors, your family, your local leaders who care about their communities. They can't run for Congress or for office because they're being crushed by millions and millions of dollars. So one of the first lessons we learn in our civic system is one person, one vote. But the reality is right now is that your vote is being obstructed by corporations and billionaires. They're pushing out the voices that you want to be representing you, and they're replacing them with their own voice, making it seem like their will, their agenda, their priorities are yours. Let me be clear. Billionaires do not have a constitutional right to own your government. When billionaires and dark money groups target your district, they're obscuring their agenda and denying you the priorities that you want. That doesn't just look like attack ads work against working class or progressive candidates. It looks like guns in our schools because Congress is too afraid to go up against the NRA. It looks like prescription drug costs that are life-threatening because your Senate is afraid to go up against Big Pharma and lose his or her election campaign. It looks like black and brown people being unable to pick their representatives because groups like AIPAC and others decided that their interests are more important than your communities. It looks like folks like Jeffrey Yass spending millions and millions and millions in Pennsylvania to influence the outcomes of elections, including my own in PA 12. This money isn't fair, and it isn't without motive. Take a look at our Supreme Court justices, right? Those who have been flown out on private jets and put up in luxury yachts, and then they rule in favor of whatever these billionaires want them to do. Look at our White House hosting Tesla commercials because Elon Musk planned to donate $100 million to Trump's super PAC. These things are all connected, and everything is contingent on us getting money out of politics. That's why I'm introducing the Abolish Super PACs Act today to start putting an end to super PACs in our federal elections. This bill would place a $5,000 limit per calendar year on contributions to super PACs, effectively abolishing them. Right now, billionaires and corporations and other wealthy interests are making unlimited contributions to these super PACs to support or oppose specific candidates or causes. This turns into multi-million-dollar campaigns against candidates, usually progressive or working class, to ensure that their interests are protected or codified into law. An average person, for perspective, an average person donates less than $100 to a political campaign. When folks are juggling the cost of eggs, of gas, of housing, of transportation, that $100 is a major commitment into our political system. And it's a commitment that should be honored. But it can't be if that $100 is offset by a billionaire giving $100 million. So if you believe that your kid deserves to have clean air and clean water, I want you to know that getting money out of politics should be one of the most important things that we prioritize right now. If you care about getting guns out of our schools so your kids do not have to consistently go through the trauma of active shooter drills, then getting money out of politics should be one of the most important things to you right now. If you care about housing affordability and big developers buying mayors and local electeds, you gotta get money out of politics. And if you care about democracy and nothing else, if you care about the checks and balances of our system, if you care about our government existing for another 250 years, then we must get money out of politics. Money in politics is a democracy reform issue. It's a civil rights issue. It's an environmental justice issue. It's a safety issue. All of these things wrapped into one, and we need to ban these super PACs because power should always be vested in the people, and the people deserve that power, not the billionaires. Not the corporate interest, we the people. So we must strategize, we must mobilize, and we must make it harder for billionaires to buy our politics, to buy our government. And we must pass the Abolish Super PACs Act and take that first step towards restoring our democracy for, of, and by the people. And I thank you so much for being with us today. I'm gonna leave that there.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Summer Lee, for your incredible leadership on this issue. I'm now honored to introduce Congressman Ro Khanna, who is also spearheading this important piece of legislation.
Well, thank you, Alexandra. Thank you, Representative Summer Lee, for your leadership, for being a voice of the grassroots and people instead of special interests. You've always shown courage in standing up for people and grassroots causes. And thank you to Larry Lessig. I was a research assistant for him once, a long time ago. He's been sounding the alarm on the money in politics for almost 20 years. And Larry, it keeps getting worse. I don't know how effective you've been, but but you've been sounding the alarm. And at some point, people are going to realize how corrupt the system has become. We have an unholy alliance in this country between wealth and power. We fought a revolution in America so that people would have a say in self-governance, not so they could be passive bystanders watching billionaires fund television and digital ads and having little say in outcomes. Obviously, it's been most abused in the past election by Musk and by super PACs that are now threatening members of Congress and senators if they vote the wrong way. But being honest, it's being abused by all parties on both sides. I mean, you have billionaires that funded the Harris campaign with super PACs. You have billionaires that funded the Trump campaign. It has to end. And what Representative Summerlee is proposing is common sense, because it passed, as Larry will go into, I'm sure, in more detail, in Maine. It passed with Republican support, it passed with independent support and Democratic support. All it's saying is you shouldn't be able to give a super PAC more money than you give a candidate, in a simple sentence. I mean, why is it that someone who's a billionaire is restricted in contributing to me? They can't contribute more than $7,000 in an election cycle to me. And yet they can go spend millions of dollars on a super PAC. It makes no sense. The Supreme Court, even this Supreme Court, has held that contribution limits to candidates are constitutional, even under Citizens United. Well, there's no reason if contributions to candidates are constitutional, contribution limits to candidates are constitutional, that you shouldn't have contribution limits be constitutional for the Supreme Court. And Maine passed it, and what Summerlee is trying to do is make sure that what Maine passed with 70% becomes federal law, so that if you want to have a super PAC for $7,000, you can. But what you can't do is have multi-millions of dollars in these super PACs, taking away agency from citizens. There should be a whole group of Republicans here. They should be here more than anyone, because they're the ones who are facing the biggest threats of these super PACs. And it really, I don't view this as a partisan issue. I view this as an issue of restoring the heartbeat of democracy, of restoring a democracy where you have to actually go be in town halls, earn people's votes by knocking on doors and talking to people, not just by relying on a couple of very, very wealthy people to run elections. Let me end with this point. I think that the country at this moment is very similar to where we were in the 1920s. They called them the Roaring 20s. There was, at the time, a lot of technology advance, the automobile, radio, television, and there was a view amongst the entrepreneurial business class, and that view was embodied by Andrew Mellon, who was the Treasury Secretary. He was sort of the quote-unquote billionaire of his time who had come into government. And what Mellon believed is that the country's progress was being led by business leaders and technology leaders, and ordinary Americans sort of were unworthy. He actually called them incompetent. And he said that they were on the public dole, they shouldn't really have a place, just give the power to the technology and business leaders. Liquidate, he said, government, liquidate labor, liquidate stocks. And Herbert Hoover listened to him, and he did exactly that. And then they learned their lesson. We had a Great Depression. And the lesson that we learned was that actually what builds the American economy, what builds our country, are ordinary, hardworking Americans. Well, we learned that lesson up till about now, and now they're trying to unlearn that lesson and go back to the 1920s. Same attitude, different generation. They think they're original, but it's the same story in history. They think they know better than ordinary Americans, and they're making the same mistakes. That's why consumer confidence is down, inflation is up, because we know in this country that it's ordinary Americans who build the nation. And what this bill does is it restores power to those ordinary Americans. So thank you, Summer, for working on it. I hope we can get a wide bipartisan group of our colleagues on this bill.
Thank you, Congressman Khanna. I'm excited to now introduce John Boniface, who is the president of Free Speech for People.
Good afternoon. Free Speech for People applauds Congresswoman Summerlee for championing this critical legislation to abolish super PACs, and we commend Congressman Ro Khanna for joining Representative Lee in introducing this bill, along with Representatives Jim McGovern, Pramila Jayapal, Rashida Tlaib, Chris Deluzio, and Delia Ramirez. Elon Musk is Exhibit A for why we need to abolish super PACs. He used super PACs to funnel hundreds of millions of dollars into the 2024 election, distorting and corrupting the electoral process. As a result, Mr. Musk now holds enormous power in this Trump administration, which he is using to unlawfully attack and dismantle government agencies and programs established by Congress, while ensuring that he stands to reap billions in government contracts. This is rampant corruption. It is obscene and it must be stopped. But Mr. Musk is not the only example of why we need to abolish super PACs. In the 15 years since the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit created super PACs through its ruling in Speech Now v. FEC, the nation has witnessed the corrosive and corrupting effects of allowing billionaires and other wealthy interests to make unlimited contributions to political action committees. The Speech Now ruling was based on the false premise that since, according to the Supreme Court, independent expenditures cannot corrupt, then unlimited contributions to political action committees making independent expenditures also cannot corrupt. 15 years of history of the corruption associated with super PACs has proven that the D.C. Circuit's ruling in Speech Now was wrongly decided. The Supreme Court has repeatedly upheld limits on contributions to candidates as constitutionally justified to prevent corruption and the appearance of corruption in the political process. Unlimited contributions to super PACs circumvent the very purpose of those contribution limits to candidates. It is long past time to abolish super PACs. This legislation represents a critical step in reclaiming our democracy. We urge members of Congress to join in co-sponsoring this bill and in demanding an end to the big money corruption of our elections and our government. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I'd now like to introduce Lawrence Lessig, the founder of EqualCitizens.us and Roy L. Furman Professor of Law and Leadership at Harvard Law School.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman Lee and Roe. It's wonderful to see you, and you still owe me that memo, but I'll forgive you right now. This is an incredible story. 15 years ago today, a bunch of smart lawyers in a court somewhere over there made a mistake. They said, through an opinion of Judge David Santel, that the logic of the Supreme Court's decision in Citizens United meant that James Madison's First Amendment required super PACs in America. It was a mistake. And I'll confess, when I first read the opinion, I didn't see the mistake. It took an article by the other Larry at Harvard, Larry Tribe and Al Schuler, and Richard Painter and Norm Eisen, to point out that under the logic of Citizens United, there's no reason that you couldn't limit contributions to an independent political action committee. And when they wrote that article, Free Speech for People took up the fight to try to get this question before the United States Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court has never had the chance to answer the question whether Speech Now was rightly decided or not. Free Speech for People took the case to the D.C. Circuit, asking them to reverse their decision. They refused. We took the case to Alaska, and the Alaska Supreme Court refused. John and I then joined together in Massachusetts to try to get the Massachusetts courts to agree that Citizens United did not mean super PACs were mandatory. We lost. But last year, on Election Day, the people of Maine voted 74.9% to enact an initiative which is exactly the law that Summer Lee and Ro Khanna want Congress to enact. And that initiative has now been challenged, surprise, surprise, by a group backed by Leonard Leo, one of the most important super PAC advocates in America, and it is working its way up the courts. I think by the end of May, we will have a decision by the district court that will then give us a chance to go to the First Circuit, which has never considered the question, and I'm confident they will get the right answer, and then we can take it to that court and give that court the chance to correct an extraordinarily embarrassing mistake. You know, I make lawyers for a living. The idea that we've had 15 years of this mistake, this legal mistake, destroying the opportunity for democracy in America is an embarrassment to my profession. And I want us to fix it so that we have a chance again to have a democracy that answers, number one, to the people. As Madison said, he promised this House would be, quote, dependent on the people alone. And he then went on to say in Federalist 57, by the people I mean, quote, not the rich more than the poor. Well, that conception of democracy has been deeply corrupted, not by the Supreme Court. We have a lot to disagree with that court, but not by that court, by a mistake of a lower court. And we're going to fix it, and when we do it, this legislation will be constitutional and we'll have a chance to restore something important in America's democracy again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Lessig. I want to highlight also in Maine just the incredible amount of bipartisan support amongst Maine voters for this issue. And I think that more than anything also, in addition to this movement in Congress to address this issue, there's also the need to build a powerful grassroots movement, and so many people are ready to take up that fight. So I'm excited to introduce Akib Yaqub, who's the Chief of Staff of Women's March.
Hey y'all, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here and for joining us. My name is Akib Yaqub, Chief of Staff at Women's March. I'm coming in today from Houston, Texas. I wanted to start by getting something straight. Our democracy should be for our people, by our people. But instead, it's by bullies for the bro oligarchy. Bros and oligarchy coming in together. I want to share a little bit how I started in this work. I started organizing my friends, my classmates, and my neighbors in middle school. That was about 19 years ago. And a couple years later, some law folks out here made some rules and made way for super PACs. And super PACs then allowed billionaires to come through and push agendas that on their own couldn't pass by the will of the people. Across the country, across the US, we are everyday folks. We are teachers, we are nurses, we are construction workers, we are organizers. We're out here knocking on doors. We're out here looking our neighbors in the eyes. We're out here doing everything we can to leave our communities better than we found them. That is democracy. That's what practicing democracy looks like. Super PACs allow billionaires a back door into this system. They are making and cutting deals, spending unlimited cash to decide elections before we even get a chance to vote. This bill, the Abolish Super PACs bill, draws a line in the sand. It says enough. Enough backdoor dealings, enough loopholes for billionaires, enough billionaires buying our elections. It gives power back to everyday people across our country. And it says to all of them, we are here, and this is how we want our futures to be, not one driven by billionaires. We're grateful for Representative Khanna and Representative Summers for bringing this bill today forward for the people and standing with us for a future we all deserve and want. Thank you.
Now I'd like to introduce Lauren Manis, who is the Political Director of If Not Now movement.
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren Manis. I'm Political Director with If Not Now, a movement of American Jews organizing our community to end U.S. support for Israel's system of apartheid and demand equality, justice, and a thriving future for all Palestinians and Israelis. My shirt here, if you can see it, says Jews Reject AIPAC, and that's because we refuse to let right-wing billionaires speak on behalf of our community, tell lies, and villainize leaders like Representative Lee, all for their unpopular pro-war agenda. Right-wing billionaires will stop at nothing to achieve their agenda of unlimited wealth at the expense of the destruction of our democracy, free speech, genocide, a burning planet. Our elections are simply not democratic as long as billionaires can buy and sell seats at their whim. Instead of a contest between which candidate is most favored to represent a district, elections have become a contest for which corporate interests, whether big oil, APAC, tech companies, can spend the most money. And super PACs are just one tool in the right-wing toolkit to dismantle our rights and freedoms. Across the board, right-wing billionaires are threatening our civil liberties, whether it's having our voices heard through elections or being able to freely and safely express dissent on our campuses, in our workplaces, and in our communities. As Elon Musk annihilates the government programs that so many of us need to survive, only to redirect trillions to his space exploration pursuits, he is also committed to pouring millions of dollars into primary elections to defeat any candidate that stands in his way. So at the most foundational level, in order to protect our First Amendment rights and the foundation of American democracy, we must abolish super PACs and stand up to the billionaire agenda of stripping away our rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. I want to highlight for everyone who's tuning in on the live stream that there is a way for everyone to learn more and also take action. If you want to go to abolishingsuperpacs.org, you can learn more about this issue and also take action to support it and help advance it in Congress. We want to see every member of Congress across the political spectrum join and support this policy and join as a co-sponsor. We're now going to move over to the Q&A. I'm going to turn over to Congresswoman Lee to lead us in that, but all of our speakers are available to answer questions from the press. Thank you.
Appreciate you for doing this, Congresswoman. You've been very vocal about the impact and influence of money in politics as it pertains to your particular district and your particular campaign. So I was wondering if you could share a little bit about what it would look like, what your campaigns would look like if super PACs did.
Yeah.
What would it look like for a woman like you?
Absolutely.
Out there who feel as though
Yeah.
they can't do what you've done. What would it look like if money and politics were?
I actually really appreciate that question because when you think about the people who are most vulnerable to this type of spending, it's almost always working class people, black and brown people, right? We're the folks, the type of candidates who are less likely to have access to the type of money that your traditional candidate is expected to have. When you first run for anything, right, the first question that people usually ask you is how much money can you raise out of your own phone, right? Can the higher the level that you want to run for, the more that the number is right? If you want to run for Congress, can you raise $1 million out of your own network, your own Rolodex? And for working class people, the answer is always no. We couldn't possibly. But so many institutions, so many community organizations, just the entire system really judges viability of candidacy based on that one ability. Before we get into any other thing, what is your background? What is your resume? How have you worked or served in your community? What is your agenda? What's your platform? The question is can you raise money? But it doesn't stop there because that's only part one of that question. The second part of the question is can you do it consistently? So if for us, you have to run every 2 years, are you able to raise that $1 million now? With the, as we talked about, the most expensive House races in history, that number for Congress is closer to $5 million, $10 million, $20 million. Can you raise $20 million every 2 years? The answer is no for an increasingly large number of people, right? So if you're just a working class person and you have working class ideas and working class priorities, they're less likely to ever see the light of day in a place like this. But what is likely to see the day are people who are willing to answer to corporations, to the corporate billionaires. But also what it does is it makes people more cowardly. People who maybe come with, I want to run because I'm a young black woman from the working class and I want to talk about public education, or I want to talk about environmental racism, or I want to talk about the cycles of gun violence, or whatever it is that comes from your community, your district. Well, now that agenda is replaced by the agenda of whoever can give you the most money, whoever can keep other people out of your race by not giving that money to them. So it completely turns on its head what our electoral system is supposed to be about, which means that it just keeps working class people out of politics. So we're going to see a system where we get more and more and more wealthy folks from particular backgrounds and fewer and fewer and fewer people from the type of backgrounds, the type of communities that we want. In our system, this is supposed to be a representative democracy. We have 435 House districts, which means that we're supposed to have 435 distinct perspectives in this place. But we cannot have that with this type of money in politics. We just can't.
Elon Musk is now spending in Florida's 1st and 6th congressional districts for special elections, also in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. But we've seen across the country over the past week in red and blue districts, there's been this backlash to Doge. Is there a liability for Elon Musk, in your mind, getting involved in these races?
I think that we should make a liability, right? There should be a legal liability to operating in our system that way. When we think about the limitations that we put, we are constitutionally, capable of putting limitations on the ways in which we engage systems, right? We recognize that speech is, money into politics is freedom of speech, but we still put limits on that. For instance, you can only give me $3,500 for a primary, another $3,500 for a general. We can put limitations on that so that we can keep the system operating in the way that is naturally intended to do. But where we have someone who has this type of unfettered money, access to money, who can then kind of funnel that into these types of super PACs where they are not as regulated as they are, right? Then that just allows them to just basically get around the rules that we have. And we recognize that, but for him spending the type of money he spent, he would not be taking press conferences out of the White House, out of the Oval Office. So the liability, I think, will come from the people, obviously. That's the final fail-safe in so much of what happens within our democracy, whether or not the people have determined that they think it's unacceptable the way that we act. I think that people think it's unacceptable that he has access to their data. I think they think it's unacceptable that he has conflicts of interest, that he is clearly bringing to, working through, and that's what obviously informs even the way that he navigates through Doge, right? I think people think it's unconscionable and out of and really beyond the pale that, somebody like him has that type of access to our leaders who has not been elected. So I know that across the country, polls and anecdotal evidence will show you that it is a liability for him to move that way. But the problem with money in politics is that it doesn't matter, because the super PAC doesn't say Elon Musk super PAC. It says America Super PAC or America First. None of these super PACs are named for what they actually do, which is what allows them that cover, that veil of secrecy to be able to move. By the time people actually realize who's putting the money in, it's almost always too late. The damage has already been done. And not only that, is that we have very loose regulations for what you can say through your spending, what type of information or disinformation you can spread. We know that he's one of the biggest perpetuators of, or spreaders of disinformation on X, his own site. We know that. That is objective fact. What would keep him from being someone who spreads disinformation through his super PACs, through ad buys, and through text messages? So that's why we need more regulation, but also that's why the people are fed up.
Congresswoman, what made you decide not to have more of a public financing rule, as some Democrats have suggested, and keep super PACs in some way intact?
This does keep super PACs in some way. It just puts limitations on them, the same way that you or I have a limitation to spend on a candidate directly. What would make a super PAC less corrupt or more free to be able to just work with unlimited amounts of money? We are simply saying that if you cannot give a candidate unlimited amounts of money, which you shouldn't be able to, you shouldn't also be able to then funnel it or aggregate it in a super PAC that has very, very little oversight and accountability. When it comes to the rest of just the portfolio around getting money out of politics, in Citizens United, campaign finance reform, I think these all go hand in hand. This is one piece of the puzzle, but there are others. There are some that have been introduced in the past and we expect to be introduced probably within weeks or if not sooner. within Congress. This is a complement to that. The end game is that we want to restore a true democracy. We want to restore a fairness to the system that simply doesn't exist anymore, and that we see is growing out of control at a rate that I'm certain even the Supreme Court could not have, or maybe should have been able to predict after in Citizens United, should have been able to predict after Free Speech Now, and so many of the other instances that came up.
Excuse me. So I know that Representative Khanna said that this is a problem that's on both sides. So I don't expect to get cooperation from Republicans, especially in this administration. But Axios reported last year that Senate Majority PAC raised $286 million for Democrats in the Senate, especially benefiting Schumer. Are you confident you'll be able to get your fellow Democrats to go along with this and give up that kind of money?
Yeah. So let me put it this way first. Getting money out of politics is the most bipartisan issue that we have in national politics outside of the halls of Congress. If you leave this building, if you leave this complex, wherever you go, in whatever city you go, in whatever state, red, blue, or purple, you will find a majority of people in this country who believe that we have to get money out of politics. You will find increasingly, as we are navigating this new administration, more evidence for why we need to get money out of politics. And I think that the argument you'll get from both sides is that they don't want to unilaterally disarm, which is why we're trying to take that argument away from them. We don't have to unilaterally disarm. We should bilaterally disarm so that no one has the excuse of, well, it helps us or it hurts them. We want it out so that everybody has an even playing field to play on. So yeah, I expect that we're going to get pushback. I think that both sides, now I'm going to say both sides, I don't speak for both sides. I know that on our side, we have given a lot of lip service, particularly to ending Citizens United. It's one of those things that we say often. We want to end Citizens United. We want common sense gun legislation. We understand that our climate is an existential crisis, right? We want to end and eradicate poverty. We want housing affordability. But at the end of the day, the policies don't match the politics. Getting money out of politics is the politics. It's the politics in what we do. It's to say that we can do none of the other things that we care most about because we will not take that first step to walk the walk and not just talk the talk. So yeah, I'm challenging. We are challenging, but not just challenging. We are welcoming our whoever it is, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, to come onto the side because it's what's right to do. Because as our democracy erodes, as our checks and balances begin to fail right before our eyes, that we see more clearly than ever how important it is that we do this. So yes, it will take some courage. It will absolutely take political bravery, but they will find that the water is warm when they come. Are we good? Thank you all so much. Thank you all. You all are wonderful.